It's 2023, and we need to deliver a program that does not use technology. It's 2023, and we have to design a fully digitalised, facilitated program using AI. Which one do you need? Or is it something in between? I'm Karen.
And I am Nuala, and we are the Safety Collaborators.
And our mission is to help people have better conversations and change the way they think about safety.
We create and deliver many programs focused on safety leadership and bridging cultures for safety. And they come in all shapes and sizes.
They sure do.
And our programs tend to be bespoke or customized because we are meeting you where you are, where your people are, and working within the resources and capacity that will help you reach your desired outcomes. What does that look like? And Karen, let's share some stories and examples, as we love to do.
Indeed we do. We've been delivering programs
A long time.
each for at least 20 plus years. I really started in earnest. I mean, I used to run a training business in the IT sector, in fact, which we ran programs for software languages. And way back then, we were still using these huge folders of see-through slide things for overhead projectors.
Yes.
They were massive programs. So these books were huge and they would go for 5 days. Thank God we don't have to do any of that anymore. That nearly gave me a heart attack, or it felt like it once upon a time. But anyway, so, because you had to ship them everywhere, you had to do all sorts of things. So bringing us right back to where we are, and we've done everything in between that and where we are today. And some of that today is doing, like many of us, are delivering things virtually. So there's a huge range in between. So if I think back, some of the programs I've ran have been literally sitting on milk crates under a tree in the heart of Africa. Mm-hmm. I have run programs. So these are all in person, because really the virtual world only really came into its own, strangely enough, since 2020. But in fact, it's been a growing side of training for a long time, if you think of e-learning and all sorts of other bits and bobs. But when you're physically facilitating something, this is where you can find yourself anywhere. So in Chad or in Mozambique or somewhere like that, under a tree, some of those are some of the best courses, by the way, to being on a vessel, as we have both done and have been doing for a long time. But I think one of our fun journeys was a trip we both did to Malawi.
Oh, that was amazing. And it was something that you were actually going to do on your own. And when you spoke to me about it, I was so inspired that I was like, Karen, find out if there's another space.
Come with.
I want to know if I can be a part of,
Yep.
I think they term it responsible travel or responsible tourism.
Yeah, responsible tourism, I think it is.
Something along those lines. And yes, it super inspired me. So share more about what was this, because you were the one who found it.
So the journey was working with a company called Orbis Expeditions, and it was a woman's mentoring program, really, and it was about giving back. So there was a bunch of us from predominantly the UK or some other locations as well, but predominantly from the UK, who have either been in business or have got something to offer and wanted to do some tourism, or, go on a holiday, if you like, that has value. So there was a few elements to this trip. One was mentoring other women. Another part was working with youth at the Rainbow School of Hope. We also did a presentation to the community of women who actually catch fish for a living.
Yes.
And the challenges they face. So there was many parts to this. And in between, of course, there was stunning scenery and just beautiful people. So it was really a lovely trip, but we came armed with things like, in the group we had, came with our rolls of flip chart paper. You ran an activity that used toilet paper, which was brilliant.
Yes, I did.
We had crayons and marker pens, and it was a very on-site, in the moment, delightful experience. I ran another activity with the school kids with tennis balls. Lo and behold, we were actually writing on chalkboards. Now, that's something I haven't done forever, right, with chalk. And it was quite nice, actually, and rubbing it out and making it all smudgy and whatever. It was great. It was a great trip. So there's many ways to deliver programs, is kind of what we're saying.
Just going back to the one in Malawi and even Mozambique, it's around what is available. Because in Malawi, even at Rainbow School, yes, when we were in the main centres and we were doing some of the programs with mentoring women in business, you have access to everything you need. You can have electricity, you can have presentations if you want, it's all there. When you're going into the more rural communities, where majority of the time there isn't electricity, it's being able to create learning, to create sustainable learning that will last, that will embed those memories for the rest of this person's life or career, and doing it in a way that adds as much value as if we were doing it in a conference centre or if you were delivering an online virtual program. And it brings me back to a story of, and I think I may have shared this before, but it's always worth sharing again because it just really brings it to the heart of it. And it was a presentation at a beautiful conference centre in a stunning African country. And this presenter was literally doing death by PowerPoint. And the entire audience was falling asleep, including the presenter. However, the lights went out, as often happens. There was a power cut and the presenter actually didn't know what to do. So a very good colleague of mine, she was also actually my mentor, was like, right, here's a flip chart. I'm going to take over and we're going to ask some questions about the content, the information that you've been sharing, and got group discussions going and what have you. And at the end of the conference or the training session, you know, the forms that go out, tell us about your experience, what have you. And quite a few of the participants commented that we learnt the most when the lights went out.
I love that line.
Yep. You know, and it really was such a poignant moment of going, how do we do things, regardless of whether it is in person, online, whatever? How do we create learning that helps people learn so that they don't have to wait for the lights to go out, but they can actually have light bulb moments throughout the program?
Indeed. So we need to think about, and there's a couple of other stories in here that we'll come to, but, you know, you need to think about, well, what are the delivery options? So really you've got to think about, well, it depends. It depends on your audience, it depends on your desired outcomes, depends on how flexible we need to be, it depends on what resources are available, how much of the program needs to be interactive or not, because there are many different ways to share what we have to share and for people to learn. So over the last 20 odd years, particularly delivering these global safety leadership programs around the world, I know I've done them in, well, one of my favourite locations was actually in Nigeria. It was great. It was outdoors and it was actually from 5 p.m. onwards, it was the local pub.
Brilliant.
It was the bar. And during the day, it was my training room. It was brilliant. I mean, I nearly lost my voice, but besides that, it went on for months. But so every morning we would get there, we set it all up for it to be a training room. And I've got some good pictures of that actually.
You've actually just reminded me, I had a similar one in Angola, and the pool table was one of
the tables.
The desks. Yes.
Exactly. and at 5 p.m, everybody, all of the participants, we'd all say, okay, now we're going to turn it back into a bar.
Brilliant.
And then we go about our merry way. Some stayed and some of us went back and had a rest. And we did that for months. And it was delightful to having amazing venues that have got all the bells and whistles. But as you rightly said, it's not which one gives the better learning experience. It depends as well. It depends on what you need. And sometimes we are just thrown into situations where we've got to just make the best of it. So if we're on an oil rig and the only room available to us sometimes is the galley, then that's where we run our workshop. Other times it might be the heli deck. Other times it'll be some funny little space between decks. They all vary.
Well, the smoking area, because it's the only outside undercovered area.
If you think about the beginning of this podcast where I said it's 2023, we've got a design for a completely no electricity, no facilities program, as well as a global digitally facilitated program. And we're doing both of these right now, where we're thinking about both of these programs. And the one that will be running in some remote area in a mining camp, there's nothing. We're going to design this with plasticized flip charts where people can write on and requires nothing. But when we go to virtual delivery, So in the beginning of 2020, when the thing that happened, that stole 2 years of our lives in many ways, but also created incredible opportunities. So I had started developing a 2-day safety leadership program that we were going to deliver around the world in the classic way, fly from one location to another. And the 4 primary locations were the Americas, Asia Pacific, Europe, and Africa, actually. So, of course, we did the first one here in Aberdeen, we did the second lot in America, and then the world came to a standstill, and that was that. So, of course, we're not unfamiliar with using technology to communicate or to have quick calls or meetings, but, all of a sudden the world was thrown into, oh my God, how do we continue these things without being physically present? So I did come across some programs. I'm not going to go into the whole story about this really, but what ended up with was we came across a platform that we use that allows us to design and to facilitate, and these are still what we call in-person programs, facilitate these workshops in such a way they're still highly interactive. They become very inclusive because now you can invite people from different departments, from different regions, considering time zones, to join in. So you get a greater range of diversity in many ways. We have a case study on this one. You can read that on our website. We'll put the link to that in the show notes down below on this case study, and it's still going today. Back then, we kicked off the digital version of the program with cohort 5, and we are currently up to cohort 20. So we're about to do another iteration on this program, in fact, to take it to another level, but it will remain a fully digital facilitated program, which is really very exciting. And we're building another one at the same time for another major oil company. The idea of this is that we have quite a diversity in ability to deliver. And I'll be honest, that's pretty unique to us. Lots of people use Zoom or Teams or whatever in some shape or form, but to be able to deliver completely without technology and to then deliver 110% and still have a really engaging event through technology is the breadth and depth of what we do.
And I don't think you actually understand the impact of it until you've experienced it. And I remember when you started talking to me about house space, this move into digital kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. But isn't that similar to what we've been doing with the e-learning program that I was running at that time? And isn't it similar to how you just have breakout rooms on Zoom or Teams? And you were like, no, it is very, very different. And you invited me into I think it was a virtual conference, actually.
The Global Change Days.
Yes, that was it.
Yeah.
And it was like my entire world shifted.
Yeah.
Because I went from going, yeah, that's nice, to, oh my word, this is amazing. The way that you engaged with your people, the conversations that you have, the fact that the AI comes into it and you've suddenly got these summaries and word clouds and it synthesizes what the group's been talking about or thinking about and puts it in a way and you go, that used to take me hours in workshops to try and get right. And we've had this conversation before of when we look at doing hybrids and blending, how we will, where possible, and people have access to the technology, combine these because it just captures everyone's thoughts.
Yeah.
I will, to this day, I still love the whole idea of small groups and pairs because it just helps people bounce ideas. But as facilitators, we lose those conversations because we cannot be in every pair. We cannot be in every group. And one of the joys around the digital side has been that the pairs and the groups capture their thoughts in their words, in how they want it to be represented. We don't have to try and summarize it into a nutshell, like, can you put that in a nutshell for me? And you don't lose it. It's something that, depending on what the program is, people can go back to it a week, 2 weeks after they've done the program and go and have those reminders and be re-inspired by their work.
Absolutely. It's true co-creation.
It is.
We often talk about these big programs, how do we get the participants to get more involved and all the rest of it? And this does it. It actually really helps. I think the other thing that's really important with what you've just said, when we have small groups and breakout groups, whether it's in the room or in the Zoom room, capturing that data, but it also, I find easier, what I see people find easier in the digital realm is that the quiet people get their voice heard through the written word. Whereas if you're in a room, usually the one person that's got the loudest voice kind of dominates. It's just human nature, right? That can still happen in a Zoom room. But while that person's talking, the other person's writing, and it's still being captured as well. And one of the great feedbacks that we get a lot on through the programs is that we can all speak. Yes. In our own way.
We can all speak in our own way, but it's also captured into that cluster conversation.
Indeed.
And I've run programs without the use of a digital facilitation platform. So I run a coaching program, which is just run through Zoom and through Zoom chats. The big frustration is that all of the chat is in one section. So you want to go and try and find something, or, somebody asks a good question, but the question's been lost because there were 10 things that related to the previous topic, and it's just not as easy and it doesn't flow as well. Whereas using a digital facilitation platform keeps the conversation where the conversation is, and you can go back to that conversation as many times as you want, and the thought will not be lost in the conversation that has maybe followed it. Conversations that matter are where we're at. So let us know what you want to chat about. Mail us at hello@safetycollaborations.com and we'll get back to you. Okay, now on with the show.
So you're not in that Zoom room with them as they're writing. And I've used the Zoom room, whether it's Teams or some other damn thing, it doesn't really matter. But whatever the synchronous component is, because that's what we call synchronous, is where you're actually seeing and speaking to each other. The nice thing about that is, so when people are in the room and they're making comments in their little group chat or however we set that up, which can be done in a multitude of ways, you can see who's making the comments, or you can make it anonymous. It depends on the program.
Or by group.
Or by group, by teams. The nice thing is, facilitators, we can actually contribute to that conversation to spark them to think more, even though we're not in the room.
Yes.
So we actually often will say, okay, that's a great idea. What about this? Or
expand on it.
And what about that? And what else? Our favourite question. So we do this, and it really keeps the conversations going for quite some time. Somebody might say, yeah, but you don't really know what they're talking about in that Zoom room. Actually, we probably do.
You get a good sense.
Yeah, we probably do. Yeah. Now, we can also skip around in those rooms if we really want to. We tend not to, because we think that's time for the participants to have their conversation without us in it. Nuala just raised a good point. I know personally I'm guilty of this because I am very passionate about the tools that we use. I'm a little bit of the tech geek in this little team of ours. So HouseSpace. So I'm actually talking about two different tools here. We have either Zoom or Teams, which most people are familiar with these days. So let's just use those. Those are the things where you're talking to each other live across your computer screen. Next to that, we have another product called HouseSpace. And our HouseSpace is a digital facilitation platform. And it's actually been around for about 20 years, in fact. And it was designed to be used for big group discussions and capturing of big data. That people would sit in rooms around their chairs with computers or laptops or whatever it was available at the time, and they would input their thoughts and ideas into this, and then they would use artificial intelligence, which has been around for quite a long time, to then summarize the conversations or the data or the information that they were getting. Of course, at the beginning of the COVID period, or just leading up to that, HouseSpace started to then evolve. It used to be called something else, into a digital facilitation platform. And the need became, how can they design something that allows everybody to join in? And how do we have collaborative, participatory work or communication and capturing and sharing in this digital realm? So HouseSpace allows us to do that because it allows you to, as participants, we invite people into the platform beforehand. You're not even live at this moment. So you can do some pre-work, if you want to call it that. I actually have my own little term for it, called it preludes, where you can actually do polls and questions and reading material. They can input their own information depending on how it's designed. From there, we go to what we call the live event. And the live event is when we then bring in the teams, Microsoft Teams or Zoom to have that physical face-to-face conversation, as well as having Housepace alive next to it, if you wish. If you want to think about it next to each other, if you're thinking about your computer screen, you've got people's faces on one side, this is how I see it, and then I have Housepace on the other side. We might put some imagery into the show notes for this to give people a bit of a sense of what that looks like. And that's where we then have conversations. We then get people to have thinking time on their own. They get input into this online platform. And from that, we can use artificial intelligence to summarize information, to give word clouds, to have polls, to have chats, to have exams even, and also set it up for self-paced learning. So it's a big platform. I don't want to get too much more about that because it'll get a little too confusing. Try and visualize that you have both of these things open at the same time.
And if you do want a bit more information, we actually have a lovely blog that summarizes this called Why We Believe in Technology and So Should You. And we will put the link to that in the show notes as well, which you can find on the website.
What's important here is that you have options. I mean, there's some other benefits to delivering using technology. And of course, there's less flights, so it's a bit more sustainable, possibly more cost effective because you're not having to fly people around the globe. Please don't misunderstand us. We love to fly around the globe.
And meet people in person.
And visit people. Absolutely, absolutely. And often it's part of the process, right? Because we actually think it's a really important component. And even if we're running a fully digitalised program, I still actually highly recommend to the organisations that they still have a day or events where the people on that cohort come together face to face where possible. So it's about looking at it, and sometimes a hybrid, which you alluded to a little bit earlier, a hybrid event is where we can actually use both of all of these technologies, our in-person physical technology, if you wish, where human bodies are next to each other, as well as the technology, because there's something very special about Housepace, that you can actually see it in your own language, but that's just a teaser. I'm not going to say any more about that.
No. So when we're looking at designing a program, or for you listening, you're kind of maybe going, okay, I've got an idea of what I want to do with my people. What needs to be considered to determine which is the best option for a client to take their program to the next level? We've put together a bit of a list, and we're going to run through that. So here are some questions for you to consider. And we start off with, well, what are the specific goals and objectives for the program? What's your why? And the next really important one is around what are the resources available for program implementation? Do we have electricity? Do we have availability to technology, to good Wi-Fi, that kind of stuff? Is there a preference for offline interactions and personal connections, or is digital convenience and efficiency a priority? And Karen, I think you've mentioned quite a few of the pros around that as well.
Yeah, and there's pros and cons to all of this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's really about going through this, and this all comes up in the needs analysis component of our conversations to start with.
And then the next one is around what is the target audience and their technological literacy. And the joy around the digital side is that if someone can operate a cell phone, they can do digital learning.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And tools actually work really well on the phone. It surprisingly works very, very well. It is browser-based, so it's not an app. It is a browser-based application, which is quite important for a lot of organisations. And it works extremely well.
On the other side of that is, again, might there be language barriers that just cannot be overcome in the digital world? And therefore you need to be in person. So that's another one of the considerations. And then is there a need for scalability and advanced features that technology can provide? When we're looking at what the AI can add into this as well, that's another side of that.
I think to add to that is, do you want to build community? So is the program going to be immersive? It's a lot more difficult to do an immersive program if you're just there for 2 days. If the program's just a 2-day program.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's digital or a hybrid of that, so you might do a part of it in person, but then the ongoing community using the digital world, is using Housepace for that. So you're building this ongoing conversation. Because one of the challenges over the years has been, how do we keep the conversations going?
Exactly. Right? That doesn't just dip off after 30 days and people have forgotten they were even on a program.
Exactly.
One of the next points is around constraints or limitations regarding technology access or usage. So, do people have availability, Wi-Fi, all that kind of stuff? And then the desired level of personalization and automation in the program. And that can go across both. So often we end up having a program that we've designed and we're on site in person and we realize, oh, hang on, wait, this audience requires something different, and you can shift. And in the moment, you are redesigning the program to deliver what is needed. But you can do that in the digital world as well.
Sometimes even easier.
Yeah.
I think the automation part is about how much can they do, if you think about flipped classroom learning. So how much can they do themselves as well versus what needs to be done in the room? Your example earlier, death by PowerPoint. And by the way, we're not maligning PowerPoint. We use it. It's, of course, for certain things. But it's not, as very experienced facilitators, we actually prefer not to, but we don't need to for a lot of work. But this is also where designing the system so that people can actually contribute to it in some shape or form. That's the automation part, is how much can we help them with that process and how much can we give them before the live component. So the live component becomes the conversation, which is where we do our learning.
And how important is data analysis and insights in achieving the program goals? I mean, I think about when I was running a visioning workshop for a team. They wanted a team vision for this project that they were on, and just to try and get consensus around words, around bringing it into a sentence. It was quite a long process. We made it fun, we made it engaging, but being able to, at the click of a button, say, summarize everyone's ideas, and then you can tweak it. Oh my word, it just creates a
game-changing.
Yeah, exactly. Wow moment.
Yeah, it's absolutely game-changing.
Budget is always a consideration. And we do need to look at, what is the budget for the program? What ongoing maintenance costs might there be for both sites?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the last one is around, are there any specific industry or sector requirements that would influence the choice? Is there something that is specific to, whether it's the mining industry, the oil and gas industry, pharmaceuticals, whatever it is, that will influence what is the best way of delivering your program?
Indeed. I think also people location might be important in this too.
Yes.
Where are your people located and how interactive do we need them to be across the globe, if you wish?
So Karen, can I ask you to wrap this up? Could you give us a little bit of a summary around technology, no technology, hybrid?
So if we've got one end of the spectrum where there's program without technology at all, it works really well in those places where we don't want to be dependent on electronic devices or even electricity. It can foster, I think you can do this in the digital space as well if it's facilitated well. But obviously, if you're face-to-face in the same space, there's that personal connection and interaction, which happens because we're human. It can be really suitable for scenarios, again, with limited or no access to technology, obviously. And I think also programs that don't, if you want highly in-person experiential learning, where you physically have teams working together, so team building exercises. Now, you can do a lot of this in the virtual realm. However, nothing beats, both of you sort of standing in a circle with a bit of rope and a blindfold on and trying to talk to each other. It's just a great activity, and we have lots of these. A lot of our work is experiential work. So that outdoor activity, those types of things, absolutely, we don't need technology for that. However, or like I said earlier, the example where we're hopefully going to be working with a program in Mozambique, in the remote part of Mozambique, where we're working with local communities, there ain't no technology there. So we can have some fun building one of those sorts of programs. To a fully digitalised program where it in many ways does enhance all aspects. It enables us to capture data more easily. It helps it to be more personalised because we can actually develop the program so that each individual has a sense of their own part of the program. It will bring very advanced features and scalability, which can be done very fast. So advanced features being the AI word summaries, word clouds, summarizations of lots of data and conversations. And the more that there is, the better it gets. It's very suitable for where people have got easier access to technology. It's very helpful. It also is important that companies embrace some of this as well in terms of their technology. Where are they sitting? And I think 2 or 3 important things with a fully digital program is it is actually very inclusive because you can get people from across the globe involved. It's really good for quick decision making. It's community building. So you may have your 2-day together live workshop, but you can keep the conversation going beyond that in the same space. And then a hybrid is really a combination of them both. Now, there's pros and cons to all of these. Hybrid can be very challenging if it's not done well. You may have already experienced hybrid meetings that haven't gone too well. So hybrid approach, the way that we talk about it is we would use both in-person and the technology in the same space. And that can also work incredibly well. So as I say, the cons to each, not really going to go into here. It really depends on your needs. Ultimately, the choice depends on your specific needs, available resources, and the objectives you want to achieve with your programs. How can we help with that? This one's a big shout out to us on this one. We don't often do promotion, but today's going to be a couple of them. How can we help you? We love to design these sorts of programs. So we have the ability to deliver meaningful programs from culture change under a tree, on a vessel, to a conference room, to fully online. So catch up with us, have a conversation.
And to read more about this, Karen, I'm going to promote you a little bit here. Karen has done some really great work in a chapter in a book called Changing Conversations for a Changing World. And it describes that pivot from when this program went from in-person to in-person virtual. And it really gives you a beautiful story and summary as to what did that look like? What was the journey? And it will hopefully help you think a little bit more about, well, what can we do in our organizations to maybe add that little bit of extra value and decide what will be best for what you're looking for. So there will be a link in the show notes to the Amazon link where you can find that book to purchase and download. Thank you for joining us today. It is always lovely to have conversations that matter, and it's been a great opportunity to share with you just what are the options out there about how you can take your learning to the next level in your industry. Connect with us on our website, safetycollaborations.com. All the show notes and links will be in there, and we will be adding a couple of pictures of us working in remote locations so you can see what does it look like when we are out there and there is no technology available. Follow us on LinkedIn, Karen Ovari and me, Nuala Gage, and share this podcast and spread the word. Thank you so much. Till next week, stay safe and stay well.